Welcome back to the Girl Gone London channel. If you're new here, my name is Caitlin. I'm a dual UK and American citizen. Today I'm answering the often asked question, do I consider myself American or do I consider myself British? For context, I have lived 12 years in the UK. I lived for 20 years in the US, so now you know how old I am. I've lived in the US still in my life longer than in the UK. I do have citizenship to both. So I have passports to both. I'm a legal citizen of both. I can vote in both. I feel at home in both. But do I consider myself American or do I consider myself British? I had to come up with some ways of trying to figure this out for myself because I do have the easy answer, but I thought let's go category by category to figure out how I feel. So also this was brought about because somebody asked me if the US and the UK were in a battle, which one would I fight for? Which is an interesting way to put it. So maybe you can guess based on where this video goes. But let's start with something less intense like sports. So when it comes to something like the Olympics, when you could have a British athlete and an American athlete competing in the same final, to be on the same podium, am I hoping that the American wins or am I hoping that the British person wins? As I'm about to say this, I feel like maybe I shouldn't do this video because it's gonna have so many dislikes. However, I'm sorry to say to my wonderful British audience, I'd probably root for the American, which I think is going to lead us towards the official answer to this question eventually. But if I had to choose, I wouldn't want to choose. I would always root for the UK athlete if there wasn't an American involved, and I would root for the American athlete. I would want them to be separate. I wouldn't want this to be the case, but sometimes it is, and I would root for the American athlete or team. Okay, next thing I wrote on my list, which goes along with this, is do I use British or American spelling? Because I feel like this will help us answer the question. Have I changed how I spell words here in the UK? I have not. I actively use American English. Well, by actively, I mean it comes naturally to me. But if my phone autocorrects something into British English, I will change it back to American English. My computer is set to, the spell check is set to American English because otherwise it would flag everything I type. And I just think this goes along with what I was saying about, do I use British words or American words, or what have I picked up? Using British spelling to me would feel, unless it was in a professional context, so unless the context was I work in an office in UK customer service, then I would use British spellings, and I have done that in the past. So I do know how to spell things the British way. I have no problem doing it if I need to, but I don't need to from a personal communication perspective, and it would just seem weird. It would seem like I'm faking it. It would be why are you adding an extra U to your words when you're American? So yeah, I do full American spellings. So if you ever get an email from me, or if you see what I write in the comments and descriptions, I can't think of anything I spell the British way. I did have an interesting experience once where I was applying to be a writer for QVC back in the day. This was years and years and years ago. And I had to take a copy test, a copywriter test. And I realized during that test that there were some things, because I'd only been in the UK for a little while, that I still wasn't sure of the British spelling on. And I was panicking the whole time. I was like, I know how to write, but I don't know how to spell traveler in the UK. And I was double checking how do I spell tire? Because that's spelled differently. So I have been in a situation before where I'm very aware of the fact that I really naturally still use American spellings, but yes, haven't changed that. Moving on. Do I use American pronunciation for words? Mostly yes. There are a couple that I don't, and those are typically, weirdly, things in the kitchen or spices. I think I say herb now instead of herb, but I never really said herb that much in America before. There's also, now I can't remember who says which. Who says oregano and who says oregano? I feel like Americans say oregano, but now I'm unsure. Some things get blended a bit. So yes, I do use mostly American pronunciation. Now, I think the bigger question is, like, culturally, do I feel British? And I made some notes on this. I don't feel British, but I feel like I understand and appreciate British culture. However, I didn't grow up going to pubs or understanding pub culture. I didn't go to a British school. I wasn't in the UK for most of my formative years. So I don't feel like I've fully become a part of British culture in the sense that I feel British, but I can vote here now. I do feel like this is home. When I use my British passport at the airport, it feels very natural to, in that sense, feel that I am British because I've lived my whole entire adult life almost in the UK. I know how some British processes work better than the American version. For instance, I understand the house buying process in the UK, but I don't in the US because I've never purchased a house in the US despite being American. However, on the other hand, I feel like I still stick out a lot and am constantly reminded that I am not from here. And I don't mean this in like a mean or rude way, but for example, in the past month, I can think of at least 3 times when I've had an interaction with someone in the public. So for instance, like a lady at Boots who was checking me out, some guy who was, wait, do you say checking you out like that in the UK? Who was ringing me up. I feel like checking me out is like if somebody is like wanting to date you and that's why they're looking at you. But I was purchasing things at the register till whatever, you know what I mean. See, this is the thing. I still am caught between 2 cultures and phrasings. So, right, the lady at the checkout, a guy who was like representing a charity that was like waiting outside of Asda to try and get you to sign up for stuff. In these instances, somebody will start talking to me and then they'll hear my accent and then it will become about where am I from? Most people think that I just moved here last month because my accent to them sounds still very American and very strong. And so then it becomes instantly pointed out in these day-to-day interactions that I am not British. I'm not from here. I am American. Like, regardless of anything else, as soon as I open my mouth, it is obvious that I'm not from here. And so when that happens a lot, which it does, it's continually reinforced that I am an American who lives in the UK, who has dual citizenship rather than being British. But how many times can we say but on the other hand? However, in this video, because there's so many different ways to look at it, when I go to America, I view America through a different lens as well. I do feel American in America, but I start noticing things from an outsider's perspective. I start noticing things that from a British perspective where I'm like, this wouldn't be what we do in the UK. And sometimes I say we when I'm referring to British people, and sometimes I say them, and sometimes I say them when referring to Americans, and sometimes I say we. So it's more nuanced than you would expect. But to wrap up this rambling video, I feel mostly American. If you asked me to give up, well, not ask me, if you made me give up one of my nationalities, I would have to give up the British one. Regardless of how much time I've spent here, regardless of my entire life here, I could not fathom giving up my American citizenship. I just absolutely could not. Obviously, it comes down to my immediate family and my closest friends are there, but also it's just to not have citizenship to America would feel so wrong to me. And I'm sure you could imagine if you're British and you moved to a different country, even if you had lived there for 10, 20, whatever years, I could imagine that most people would not choose to give up their country of birth as long as they lived there long enough to really have that be a part of their identity. So it doesn't mean I don't love the UK. It doesn't even mean that I'm planning on moving to America, or that this is a short-term thing, or that I don't feel comfortable here. It doesn't mean I'm not interested in UK culture. It doesn't mean I don't appreciate things. But if you made me answer the question, do I feel American or do I feel British? I do feel American, and I don't feel British in many ways, despite living here and living amongst the British. And also, if I was in America, I would say among the British, because we don't say amongst, but there's one thing that I do say that's British influenced. So I hope that answers the question. Maybe not in the way that some people would like, but that is the honest answer. Leave your comments down below. A lot of people don't have the experience of living in multiple countries, so it can be hard to imagine how you might feel. But leave your thoughts, your comments. If you were in that situation, what do you think might happen if you moved to a different country? Some people lived in, 3 different countries by the time they were 10 and kind of don't have a particular identity into one culture, which I find really interesting, but I definitely do. I definitely do still feel American and don't anticipate that really ever going away. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.